Hello, this is James. You may recognise me from the Mjolnir at the Movies podcast. Today I'm here with a solo effort to examine The Matrix Reloaded. I've previously discussed some thoughts on the franchise with the Mjolnir at the Movies crowd. If you haven't seen that video already, it's definitely worth watching. I'll leave a link in the description to the channel, you can find it there. One thing I noticed during the discussion on this was the complete absence of art within the ship itself, and at the time focusing mostly on the first film, it seemed, you could excuse the lack of art if you used the terms of, it's a military ship, it's a dystopia and so on. So it was a minimalistic, possibly a minimalistic situation. But the second film gives the new vantage point of examining the home city, the city of Zion, present in the film, which is depicted as the only home of humanity outside of the Matrix. And so the question arises, how are these newly freed people expressing themselves? How are they using their freedom? And are they squandering that freedom? Now, the spoiler alert here is that I really don't like this film. The more I look at it, the worse it seems, the sloppier the whole production seems to be, despite the huge budget and accolades it got. I'll hopefully be justifying this somewhat with some stills which I've taken to hopefully avoid the copyright algorithm demons. I'll be using these stills to review and display what I'm talking about when it comes to the shortfalls in this and the strange choices made in the production. And so we start off inside the ship again, which you're familiar with from the first film. If you look at the design of it, it's obviously based on something like a submarine, but oddly enough the whole thing is this rusting hulk. Everything is covered in rust. You see this first image, the bedroom, there's rust going down the walls, the paint's going, the metalwork seems to be bubbling up with corrosion. You see an image of the door. On the door there's rust and stains and dirt. Everything looks filthy and depressing. Looking back, you can see that the room itself is completely bare, minimum, depressing, grey. There's nothing really redeeming about it at all. It looks like a nightmarish prison cell. And again, this is the free humanity displayed in the film. This is what they've fought for to build and over generations. And here we see the kitchen, which again feels more like a prison cell than anything free and joyful or inhuman and alive. A different angle of the shot here. Again, you can see the obvious submarine inspiration. I don't know why they decided to go with the submarine, but it was probably taking cues from the various submarine films that have been done in the past. But it does then give it a particular aesthetic and feeling, especially as you know, Trinity here is shown wearing rags, and also Neo and the other crew in the first film you would see wearing similar rags, ill-fitting, worn, dirty. Everything's always shown this way, repeatedly. Now, if we were only looking at the first film, you might have a seed of doubt as to the conclusions drawn from this situation, because you could say, it's only a military ship, perhaps their home is where they concentrate on these things and they leave the ships bare. But in this film, of course, we get an excellent look around the city, various aspects of it. You see the family homes, public spaces, and here we see the entrance to Zion. Now, this would make sense for it to blend in with the background. So the doors open and in we go. And here we get an overlook of the city as the ship sweeps in to the left. And what do you see?
You'll find the predominant colour to be grey. The buildings, the clothes, the people.
Grey, more concrete, more blandness. Nothing at all that gives you an idea of colour. I mean, if you go to even a commercial airport, it'll be brighter and more colourful than this. Remember, this is their only homeland. This is it for humanity in the film. They've nothing else, and they've spent here generations building on this. You see here a shot facing back to the ship, so the inside is just as grey and bland as the outside. You can see the interior of the air traffic control, whatever we want to call it. The aircraft control centre is bland as well, although in this scene is the first oddity that stands out to me on examination of this film. You'll note the guards or controllers' uniform or clothes. I'll come back to that in a minute. We see here more shots of the mechanisms and walkways within Zion, and again it's grey, grey, grey all the way, this horrible, depressing look. And on top of that, you'll see that even what they have is dirty and decaying, as if it's not looked after at all or barely looked after. It reminds me of some of the scenes of old abandoned Soviet bases or the exclusion zone in Chernobyl. But this is a living space for 250,000 people and has been a living space for generations. And so the only conclusion you can draw from this initial glance is that the people living there have no care or regard or effort towards any kind of preservation of this, which is all they're meant to have. Of course, as part of this scene, we also see the absolutely ridiculous robot suits that are in this. Again, I can understand that this film borrowed heavily from anime and various manga influences, but it's so out of place and ridiculous in this film. But moving swiftly on, we see soon after this scene some guards approaching, and you'll notice the clothes they're wearing are night and day difference to what we've seen in the first film and in the crew of this film as well. For some reason, they have ample supplies, technology, stylists, cloth makers and so on to outfit the guards in their fashionable clothing of the day. And if you look at it closely, you'll notice things like embroidery style details and so on, which imply obviously some sort of artistic bent. You can't produce this stuff with no appreciation for aesthetics. And we see here another example with the guard bringing in the counsellor, and you see once again the guard has the styled uniform compared to the rags before, and the counsellor now is this another style with different cloths that's even more elaborate. You'll see certain textures woven into the fabric. Yet where is the artistic expression elsewhere? Is the artistic expression of Zion concentrated entirely within the weaving industry? And you'll see the drab rags worn not just by the ship crew, but also by characters such as the plucky kid stereotype that runs up to the crew early on and carries the bags. In the scene with the council, we can see the very diverse outfits worn here, which again show that there must be some capability in this world, this city, to produce these things. There must be some aesthetic appreciation, which somehow is completely overlooked in every other aspect of the city, every other design, which looks like something scraped out of a landfill. You'll see in this first counsellor, not only is she wearing robes with gold detail on them, patterns, but she's also now wearing jewellery, which shows yet another expression of the aesthetic. Though the crudity of the jewellery was one thing that stood out to me. It's the headdress, whatever you would call it. It's made of these gemstones. Where they're getting the gemstones, I don't know. We can only assume at the back of Zion they must have a gem mine somewhere, which is never displayed, nor are any of the people who work these items ever displayed. Quite bizarre. You might consider this a bit harsh, but you've got to remember this is a AAA film with a budget most people could only ever dream of. And on top of that, of course, the fans and the directors and the people involved in this production all are happy to talk about the hidden symbolism and the many layers of meaning. So if you're going to step up to that claim, then I think it's more than justified to nitpick over these details. And a lot of it I don't really feel is nitpicking. This is actually quite sloppy. If you compare this to what I think is a superior film which came out around the time, which was Dark City, another film we've covered at Mjolnir at the Movies, that set design, that world felt complete. The details in that world fits and flows logically for the rules of that world, which is very important. While in this one, you've got to question, well, where did that come from? How did that work? Why is it that way? Where are these gaps in what you'd expect for normal human life, normal human behaviour coming from? Back to the jewellery worn here. Now, it's almost like an eBay ethnic jewellery store from China, and somebody's bought this at $1, £1, €1, and stuck it on her. It does not look like any kind of quality crafts. And these are, of course, meant to be the ruling council, and she's apparently one of the few people who gets to wear something other than rags. Yet this is what 250,000 people can produce, apparently. But then I get the feeling that with many examples I'm going to give in this, particularly the strange discrepancy between set design, the clothing and so on, I actually think the problem here is that there was very little grand plan and communication, and each department was probably working on their own ideas and was simply okayed without thought as to how this would affect the world and its implied narrative. Because why you would go to the bother to make a headdress and all this jewellery and set up looms to produce fabulous cloth when the rest of the time you've not even got paint on the walls and everyone else is wearing rags and everything's drab and dirty and looks like a prison cell. It doesn't make any sense. It's not something that would really work. I mean, even the meanest and lowest skill peasant in medieval times could at least scratch something into a tree with a nail, or write on a rock or something, use a bit of chalk, a bit of paint. The cavemen in the past managed to, with Stone Age technology, paint on the wall various animals, handprints and so on. Yet apparently this 250,000 people with hovercraft technology and all sorts of bizarre weaponry, tools, enormous industry, can't even muster up a tin of paint. So that's why I think that, and what's actually happening with the clothes is it's not indicating anything more than a very superficial pandering to certain desires to show vibrancy in the community here, certain ethnic expressions. I really don't think that this was made to try and fill this cultural void that's been left in the film, the absence of art. And we go on to another wide shot of the council, showing it from the side here. You can get a sort of overlook of the outfits on display here. And with this councillor, you can see again the fancy weaving. It's another style, which is again another thing to note, is all the different styles of clothes all mashed together. There's very little uniformity. When they do step outside of the basic rags, there's very little uniformity in what we see. So again, you can only assume that there's somebody producing this enormous variety of clothes and items, but only one of, to a standard which is obviously requiring mechanisation or very highly skilled and developed industries which are not apparent. I have no idea what the jewellery piece he's wearing is, but I think it's yet another mashup of various exotic items which they wanted to try and make these scenes seem as exotic as possible, which is of course a running theme through the whole city of Zion as we go through this. But the problem with this, of course, is it's all superficial. You'll notice the man here is wearing a scarf with Chinese symbols on it. I don't know what culture the neck piece comes from, and you'll see this over and over again, just sort of slapped on to try and seem as exotic as possible. The set design and the clothes in these scenes where they try and make a show of the exotic nature, It often feels like the old Xena and Hercules market scenes where you'd see all sorts of terrible junk on display, but they were just trying to give you a quick glimpse of, oh look, you're in an exotic marketplace. Even films from decades ago did it better than this. You can see here another close-up detail of the scarf again, which is out of place in a world that apparently doesn't even understand the use of paint. Now we can contrast this with a particularly bizarre scene set in this sewer within the Matrix, or a construction representing a sewer, where everybody stands po-faced with sunglasses on in their leather outfits, and it's so hammed up. Everybody standing there trying to look super serious. It's it's like the definition of try hard. Everybody's wearing sunglasses in a sewer. Sunglasses in a sewer.
My vision is augmented.
Straight-faced, trying to play this serious. Maybe the assumption here is that these sunglasses have some special ability, which reminds me of another film which was much better than this one. But one thing to look at, of course, is when they're wearing all these outfits and they're exploring this Matrix world which they've come from, they at least have examples of aesthetics and to kind of get them kick-started. You know, this is meant to be, of course, the last of humanity and what it looked like. Now, it doesn't really matter in this situation whether or not that's true, but they've nonetheless got countless examples from this, from their software, the programs, the Matrix, of the possibilities out there which they could develop upon and clone, or come up with brand new ideas. Yet what they produce is bizarre fetish outfits when they're in the Matrix, and sunglasses, and when they're out you've got rags. I do feel a bit sorry for some of the extras who look out of place and seem to have got their suit for the Matrix off the rack, which has to burn a bit that you can't even get a tailor fit one in the Matrix. But we'll leave our po-faced, sunglass wearing sewer dwellers for a minute and move on back to Zion. Now we can see here we're going to look at some of the living spaces and working spaces that people have in the city, and we'll start off looking at this security office which you see fairly early on in the film. Now the inside of the office door here, you can see once again it's very little difference to the look of the ships. It's rusty, drab, dirty. It looks like a abandoned Soviet submarine from decades ago. And you can see here with the scene pointing towards the desk, this is his working space he's using every day. He's lived here for all these years, worked for this job all these years, and no doubt his predecessors have, and yet everything's dirty, rusty, nasty, not a lick of paint. It's just grey. I mean, even his outfit is completely bland, but the desk itself is appalling. It looks like an abandoned factory again, and bizarrely he's got a pile of equipment next to him, unexplained. I can't even imagine what essentially an administrator would need with this technical equipment, but this is showing the sloppiness of the set design, the sloppiness of the overall vision, and ultimately the failing of the directors, because that is where the buck stops. If he sees something bad, he should say, no, remove that from the set. No, I need this changed. This is my vision, and so on. Especially, again, people who are very keen to boast about their design, their vision for this, and the layers of meaning and so on, and bank on that. Now, even looking at the desk here, you can see how ridiculous the design is. It looks more like a bench for putting a truck engine on top of rather than writing on top of. But yet, if this was all they had, then who's producing his office chair? As you can see the wheels sticking out under the chair. Now this is back to the sloppiness of the design and the lack of care and attention. If somebody's making soft furnishings, wheeling office chairs in for him, couldn't he have a reasonable desk? Something that looked more like a comfortable space to live or work in. And if you look at his desk, there's an odd object on top of it. It's almost, quite possibly the only art object I've seen in it. And I may correct myself if I find one later on, but you'll see this sort of trench art facsimile, I think it's meant to be, where somebody's made this rocket ship or plane, whatever it's meant to be, out of what looks like shell casings from bullets. You can see a couple of landing wheels on it. I'll maybe zoom in this to help you see it better. Now, there's no explanation for this, where it came from. There's no consistency with this. I mean, you would expect in this situation to see, if they had limited resources or had to reuse junk, you might see what we would call trench art from the First World War, where they used the shell casings from artillery. Although, notably, there was countless examples which looked far better to anything we've seen so far. I mean, this is the best of the best that the city of Zion has to offer so far for the public viewing. So what this is meant to be, where it came from, is unknown. You could say, is it a toy? Was it made by a child? Was it inherited with the position in the desk? We don't know. And this is, in fact, part of the problem of this whole story and design of this film. When you throw in something like that and it doesn't fit, then the problem isn't with the viewer, the problem's with the world you've built. If I saw that in a film where there was all manner of handcrafted items lying around, I wouldn't need to question it. It wouldn't stand out of place. But when this is put in, and with the inconsistency in the design, and I'm almost certain as I go on with this that each department, the set design, the costume design, the director's on, were badly communicating, and so there was not a coherent vision for how this world worked. And no matter what view you look at this office, you can see it's drab, dirty, rotten, rusty. All of it is consistent with what we saw in the ship, yet this is a constant living space. You'd assume cleaned and maintained, because if you don't do basic cleaning in a place where people have been living 100 years, there should be rubbish, dirt and all sorts piled up. So what is going on here is never explained. And we see here another overview of the city, which again, the predominant colour is grey. There's nothing beautiful about it. There's nothing natural about it. This is one of the key problems with the whole of this city and everything designed with it, is there's an almost total lack of nature. Now, there's a backstory about how nature was damaged, disrupted and destroyed and so on, but you'd think the people of Zion, especially having the enforced memories of the Matrix and their own memory of what they've lost, would try and recreate nature and get in touch with the nature within themselves. But this is not happening. You're seeing instead a rejection of it, and almost an enforcement of the misery, in the sense that they're doing nothing to try and counteract it. They've just completely embraced this metallic world, which is ironic considering the metallic fake world was what they were meant to be running from. So they've run from a fake, more natural world to a completely unnatural, dead, sterile world of their own. And only they can take responsibility for it. And in the engineering section, where we get our back of the cornflakes packet philosophy about their dependence on machines, you can see once again how drab and nasty the whole place is. And also that it's made clear that despite the very primitive lifestyle they seem to show in most of the city, a lot of their requirements for life are provided from this system, which you would assume would give them more free time for expression, art and so on, but apparently not. The excuses for this city and the people in it really start to wear thin when you get to the point where you're seeing inside the homes, the family homes. We can see here, like the character Link's home, The inside again is the same as the submarine environments before. Everything's rusty, nasty, unpainted, uncared for, dirty. And surprisingly, even the inside looks much like it. Everything's, again, made of scrap and rags, which doesn't make any sense, seeing as we know that they must be able to produce stuff that's of high technical ability on fancy cloths and so on, because of course these cloths can't be inherited from the last time of humanity. They were worn out centuries ago. I've no idea, curiously enough, what this thing on the left is, as it looks like some kind of rack for sponges. What exactly this what purpose it serves, I don't know. But moving on to the scene itself, you'll see here a family home. There's a man and wife, and you'll see these kids here. So you know that there's kids running around this place. Not necessarily at this home all the time, as you find out these are nephews and nieces. But why are there not even any kids' drawings, any graffiti, something pinned in a wall like you would with the kids' drawing in the fridge door? There's nothing. It's so dead and empty. It looks like an abandoned home from long ago that they've just walked into. But the excuse of the later excuse given about the cycle of the city of Zion doesn't fit, because of course these people have been living here for about a century at least, so there's umpteen generations laid upon this. Yeah, nobody's felt the need to decorate it, nobody's felt the need to scroll on a wall or encourage their kid to express themselves in any way. And you can see from other angles in this home that it's still just as drab and empty as always. And again, the costume design is sort of mismatched and patchy from what we've seen elsewhere. The actress, you can see, has a tattoo here, but that actually isn't from Zion or the story. This is actually the actress's own, as I've checked to see if this was the case or not. So we can basically ignore that for this film, because it's yet another accident of casting, accident of the set, rather than anything planned. And then, oddly enough, when we start to see the homes of Morpheus, Neo, and obviously some other people, at last we see some red paint. It must have been stashed away long ago. It was hidden in a cupboard. Maybe there was this one splurge from the reserves of red paint, because even the red paint doors seem to be rusty, nasty, worn. So however much red paint they had in reserve must have been used up in that time. But it does make you wonder, if they have this paint, why aren't they using it? What are they doing if they can make all these pigments and then apparently not even bother with it? What kind of people don't express themselves even in the slightest artistically? And we see this also with Neo's home, which also has the same red paint, and also the world's most bizarre number plate stuck on the door. Who knows what that's meant to be? Again, it was another addition, I suspect, was just meant to make it look strange and exotic. Now, when we get to this counsellor's office, I thought maybe I'd have to backtrack on the idea that there's no art, because at last we see these display cases with the books inside. Of course, the wall on the inside is this rusty submarine look again. There's two light fittings which show at least some basic artistry. But the really interesting shot in this room is, of course, when you see his desk, which suddenly we have this area which at least has some basic styling, even if it's quite primitive looking. And you see these objects around him. But it becomes clear, just like the books in the cases and the clock mechanism in the background, that these aren't objects that they've created. These are things he's preserved, relics from the pre-apocalypse humanity. So what almost seemed like the first chance for them to show that Zion can produce art ended up being a room of more trinkets and junk, albeit this time something perhaps worth preserving. So I'm not going to change my assessment that Zion is an artless city. It's a city with no ability to create culture in art, only seems to have the ability to hoard very, very few trinkets that they have now. But of course the wonder is, why, if they have these examples, haven't they built upon it? Why haven't they learned from it and tried to recreate anything and build new, better things? But we see his room with these items, which have been held all this time. The other concern here would be, if this is the only artefacts they have left, shouldn't they be stored in a better place than his desk? Can't they copy the contents of these books into something they can safely use, rather than thumbing through what might be the last books of humanity, hundreds of years old, worn out, and carelessly left on a desk piled up? But there's no explanation given at any point, implied or otherwise, why this room is so different to all the others. You're just meant to unconsciously accept the complete contrast, the total difference in this style, in construction even, without question, without wondering what's going on with the rest of this city. Now, with the scene with the supplicants that approach Neo, the diversity on display again, but not only in the people cast in the roles, but the outfits chosen. They're not wearing a single fashion or uniform. They're not wearing the same sort of rags you saw on the crew or the plucky young kid in some of the other characters. Here we've got this deliberate display of the exotic in every way, including the bizarre range of trinkets and junk offered to him, which doesn't really make any sense, because when you see the homes that everyone seems to live in, including Neo and Link and all the rest, they're shoebox size, and just the offerings on display there wouldn't fit in his house, and also apparently has no need for them. But you'll notice as we get a closer look at the crowd and their offerings, this out of place jewellery, pottery and other items that you think, well, where are these coming from if they're in a world with no art, which is apparently what they're in? I think again that the design for this was simply somebody trying to reach for the most non-European, the most exotic, with visions of some foreign bazaar that they've maybe visited or saw in a book or another film. In Link's home, there's an example of the jewellery being brought to the fore, where his wife hands him this necklace that's it's not bad, but it's relatively crude for what can be produced by humanity, especially with the apparent technology that they have on display. But again, the question comes where, why, if they feel the need to produce and wear this jewellery, are they not doing anything artistic or more meaningful or deeper? Where are the creations? We'll touch on some of the other aesthetic expressions such as music in a minute, but in this case you see that the jewellery isn't something that they can even claim to be entirely overlooked or just a blunder of the costume designers, because it's now in the script, it's been handed to a main character. And as a quick aside before we move on to the music and the big scene that showcases it, I want to look at some of the absolutely horrible props in this film and wonder what went through somebody's head when they were making it. We see, of course, the world's worst spoon given to Neo. It looks like it was made out of Play-Doh and then spray painted with silver paint. We see the knife that the Agent Smith in the Zion world is holding. It's again bizarre. It's got this crude weld. For some reason, there's a bolt in it. I've never seen anybody make a knife like this. I can't even think why somebody would make a knife like this, especially as people have made more practical, more comfortable to use and nicer looking knives with technology 1,000 years older than what they have to hand. It's not exactly the world's most difficult thing for them to do. And of course the absolute worst prop certainly the worst that they showcase by zooming in is this one. It's absolutely bizarre. It looks like it was made in a sci-fi TV series from the 70s, really low budget. Somebody's cobbled this together within 12 hours under pressure from whatever they could find in their garage bin or scavenged out of a broken TV. It's absolute nonsense. Anybody with, in particular with any kind of technical knowledge, is going to look at this and probably just weep. You've got some bizarre bits of metal stuck together. You've got some old chips, which for the time period that they're meant to be basing their technology on, it's completely out of place. You've got ancient old dip chips, which are clearly just epoxied and stuck on here and there. It looks like something a kid would make for doing their own bit of home camcorder work, doing their own bit of fun, which would be actually quite endearing in that situation. But for a AAA budget, this is actually really awful. And it's worth pointing this out because there's going to be self-conscious wannabe filmmakers. There'll be people who want to make even just the props, sets, designs. Now, when I'm looking through this and you're hearing me nitpick, remember that this was acceptable for a AAA budget film, massive hit, and it went right through fine. It was given the green light all the way. It was given good reviews, and it made a profit. So if you've got any sense of pride in craft and think that you can do at least equal to what you see in this or better, go for it. Don't shy away thinking that you're not capable of it. In fact, I'll even say that if you do worse than this, it's not even that bad, because we're talking about a AAA budget. If you, with your friends, are recording a short film, a scene, a recreation of something, a homage to something, a parody, it doesn't even need to be this good. But it's worth keeping in mind that this is what can fly in a AAA film. This is what an enormous budget can sometimes produce. And it looks like a stinker, but in the end, we all know it went through and they got away with it. In some ways, I've saved the best or worst for last, and I think this cave scene brings together a lot of complaints that I have about this film into one scene. Everything from the lack of art to the lack of effort and solid thought out design, the over-encompassing world design that should be in any really story world, but particularly one like this where it has all the budget you could hope for and all the manpower you could hope for. Now, this cave is represented as both the main hub for their social gatherings, political meetings, and the closest thing these people to have any kind of group expression. Or this place, you could say, was the soul of the city. And when you see what it's like, it's quite a sorry state this soul is in. And as we head in, you see the entrance, which once again looks like something from an industrial nightmare wasteland rather than a place of spirituality, joy, or any kind of great expression and pride. Inside, we see this strange group dressed, and for one of the rare times, all in the same clothes. Now, is this a uniform? Is there some meaning behind this? I doubt it. I actually doubt it. Now, they might come up with something afterwards to make up excuses to fans' questions, but I really think that this was just somebody dressing these people to look interesting and dropped them in without a thought. I don't think there was any deeper meaning, because of course the question is, where did these outfits come from? Who's designing them? Who's tailoring them? Who makes the cloth? Why is the plucky kid stereotype wearing rags while these people are wearing fancy outfits? None of it makes sense. As we head into the cave, you get the viewpoint of the council member talking to the crowd. Now, this being their great centre, we see it's now gone from, as the entrance was, this sort of water-worn water deposit, to this scene where it's more raw and rocky. There's no effort at all to adapt this to their own use. And what makes it worse, of course, is, as we find out from the architect later on, this home has been used for centuries. So at no point, apparently, in centuries, did anybody think to carve something into the rock, paint something onto the rock. It's just been left completely bare and natural. The people are holding up torches. Again, where these came from, I don't know. Maybe there's a supply of trees somewhere stashed. A lot of lumber maybe was stored away before the apocalypse. But they've all got these torches, which they're holding up, which somehow light up this enormous cavern, even up to the roof of it, which anybody who's held a candle in the dark somewhere knows is absolute nonsense. They cannot possibly light up this scene that way. And to make it even worse, you see he's strongly lit from above, which immediately makes me think, well, it looks like sunlight. And wait a minute, it can't be sunlight. One, because they're in a cave deep underground. But two, because we've established in the first film that they blackened the sky and there's no sunlight. So it's not sunlight, it's not the torches because they're below them and they can't possibly create a bright, strong daylight on them. So is there hidden spotlights put into the mile-high cavern or whatever size it is, stashed away somewhere? It doesn't make any sense, but, and this is where I come back to appealing to any potentially or actual people actually involved in anything, filmmakers, creative people, just look at the kind of mistakes these people do, or the kind of choices do. Now, this went through AAA. You can probably do better. Somebody out there that's listening to this, somebody that maybe talks to somebody else that listens to this, however the word gets out, but there's so many flaws in this that it's actually worth looking at to boost your own confidence. Because if the professionals can make mistakes and do odd things, jarring things, then I think it gives yourself some hope for what you can do. Of particular note in this scene, I'd ask you to look off to the side here at a giant lava pit in the middle of their dance scene, or future dance scene. But so here we've got a meeting room, which has apparently been used for countless generations going back, but 500 years possibly if you take the architect machine as being honest. But even if it isn't just the humans' point of view, we know they've been there for generations, and they've got a giant open lava pit somehow in their meeting hall, and they all stand around this giant glowing lava pit as if it's perfectly normal and safe. Nobody at any point, I'd assume, has fallen in, got burnt from the enormous amount of heat that must come from the giant glowing lava pits dotted around this hall. Nobody's fallen in and died. Kids haven't been playing near it. Nobody thought to maybe put a railing. I mean, I guess health and safety teams don't exist in this apocalyptic future, but you think common sense might exist, and people would say, let's not gather around the giant glowing lava pit. Let's not dance around the giant glowing lava pits. It could be a mistake in the making, especially when you're distracted, of course, by the leader talking, music, an enormous crowd of potentially most of the 250,000, or at least a significant chunk, cramming themselves in to try and get up front, pushing people from behind towards the giant glowing lava pits. Now, and again, I think a lot of us just using common sense wouldn't design this set that way. It's a completely unnecessary addition because it doesn't explain the light in the scene. It doesn't really add to the atmosphere. It's obviously just something somebody thought looked cool at the time, but with no coherent vision or way to explain it. Because not only have you got this natural looking cave, but you've got to remember these people have been living here centuries. This is their home for generations. And look what we've got. We've got him, the council member, standing in this shaft of light again, which looks like daylight coming from above. But in the Matrix films, of course, of all places, we know it can't be a shaft of sunlight coming from above. So it's never explained, just like the blue glow in the background is never explained. It's the kind of things that would have been done in really old Journey to the Centre of the Earth films, the really old Disney fantasy films showing caves, because at least back then there's the excuse where it was all indoor sets and they had to light them just for them to show up, and they just hand waved it away and said, well, actually it's meant to be dark. But here we have this high budget, we've got unlimited CGI in use everywhere, and you see what they've produced. They're all standing in this cave just on top of the rocks. There's no podium, there's nothing carved, there's nothing built. There's bizarre, impossible light sources everywhere. And the crowd, again, with their torches, which we don't know where they came from, but apparently they've got this unlimited fuel supply to burn up, they're not worried about. And we see more of the crowds, more of the torches, enormous crowd, but this light, which is never explained, coming from it everywhere. We see again the cave, more of the cave, with the glowing daylight. It's some kind of magical light, never explained. Now, as we look through the crowd, I thought of a particular note. I mean, obviously the choice of the casting, was deliberate. They wanted this crowd to be as diverse as possible. But a particularly odd choice, was the two characters here you can see on the left and right with these elaborate tribal tattoos. Now, the trouble with this is, I would guess that's actually will be the real actors' tattoos. It wouldn't surprise me if that was the case. But the problem in the context of this film is that everyone in there has to either be natural born through the generations, or they came out the Matrix. If they've come out the Matrix, they would come out as children or adults, but fully formed in that sense. But they wouldn't have had the tattoos. Where would these tattoos come from? So these people would have to have come from the artificial Matrix world, which they know isn't real, and which depicts a world which was dead and gone centuries, or at least in their reckoning, if you take the first film, long, decades and decades before they were even born. So it was gone all this time, and then they came out the Matrix, or were born naturally, and then just decided, well, I'm of this, this is what it's got to be, I'm of this ethnicity, so I'm going to copy these tribal tattoos, which they can only be aware of from the Matrix, because they have such poor records. There's clearly no constant lineage of people. They've just got this grab bag of random diverse people, rather than long lineages of people who can remember their culture, their history, their bloodline, and the meaning of these things. They've only got what they've borrowed from the artificially created Matrix. So they came out of the Matrix or got to adult, just decided, I'm going to tattoo these on because of my ethnicity, or what they have been told from the Matrix of their ethnicity. And I think that's quite bizarre and a sort of undermining, again, the world that they've built. It doesn't make sense in the context of the world that these people have created for this film. We see the attempt at musical expression here with instruments once again made of junk. Why this is the case, I don't know. They're able to make these fine cloths, they're able to make hovercraft and all manner of other things, but a drum is apparently a step too far. So we have these huge numbers of drums of all types, as long as the type comes under junk, and that seems to be it. There doesn't seem to be any stringed instruments, wind, anything. So that the only thing these people have as artistic expression when it comes to music is just banging drums, which it's showing the degradation towards the primitive, and even as I said, cavemen, you'd expect a painting on the wall. They carved things in the Stone Age. So what is going on with these people who apparently have nothing but these drums? And of course, it also highlights the insanity of using this meeting hall with the giant glowing lava pits as they all dance barefoot around the lava. Barefoot around the lava. And the dance, of course, is nothing but stamping their feet and jumping up and down to these drums. Of course, for the purpose of the film, they then put over electronically generated music. But you know, from looking at this, that the music that these people have in the film world, in this world of the film, I should say, is nothing but these drums. But of course, the irony is that they have obviously advanced computers. They have their own constructs and ability to generate all sorts of computer screens and consoles and images on that. Why haven't they created computer generated music, electronic music? Even if they don't have a keyboard, you can still make music. You can still program some sort of music maker. So it makes no sense that all they have to express themselves is banging a drum monotonously and then jumping up and down to that drum next to the giant glowing lava pits. Later on in the scene, we see Trinity come in with, I'd assume, what's meant to be her Sunday best for this dance, which is, again, they've chosen to make it out of rags, which doesn't even make any sense now, because we've seen many examples of people wearing finer cloth and robes. Not just the councillors now, we've seen the various ethnic representations with their own styles and outfits, dyed clothes, detailed woven cloth. But yet she apparently gets lumped with a kind of drab, undyed, very rough cloth top. As I think if you offered that to most women for their night out, you'd get a slap, but we'll leave that aside. You can see in the cave again, the cave lit up in the ceiling. How this happens from a handful of torches is never explained. But it also shows there's no hidden floodlights up there. You know, the light is coming purely from these torches if you take the scene at face value. And they decided to happily give you another overview as they zoom through, showing people stamping around the giant lava pits. It looks like something out of Lord of the Rings now. I mean, that's pretty bad. It looks like the goblins or the Uruk-hai dancing and getting excited to march out to destroy man here as the drums bang and they dance round the hellish cave nightmare underworld with lava glowing. You can see some sort of lava bridge with people on it, which people are, of course, stamping and jumping up and down on while the lava is boiling and smoking underneath them. I mean, how these people survive not only the Matrix and the threat of the robots, but how do they even survive daily life? Blundering into these dangers, I don't know. The scene then transitions to this love scene between Trinity and Neo, where we find out that once again the homes inside, even for the Messiah of this world and for the senior crew, are again drab, vile. Not only that, Neo or Trinity, whoever's house this is, apparently contains a giant pizza oven for them to sleep in, because that's all I can think of when I see this. I think that is a giant pizza oven they've been given. It's like somebody did it for a bet. Somebody thought, oh, Neo'll never put up with it, will he? And then once he accepted, they've just nobody, because he's the Messiah, wanted to break it to him. Oh, sorry, you know, we made this giant pizza oven and we just thought, I wonder if he'll sleep in it. And now nobody can admit to the fault. We also see the scene candles. Again, where the candles come from, I don't know, because your choices there would be animal fat, beeswax, none of which are available to these people anymore, or petroleum products. Well, where's the oil? Well, I don't know, but maybe we've just got to hand wave and say there's a magical machine producing candles somewhere, which are apparently plentiful enough for them to just dot randomly about and burn by the dozen. Of course, this situation might explain Cypher's true motivation for his betrayal in the first film. Everybody assumed it was just for luxury and wealth, but what if this man struggled to gain freedom, fought for these people on the promise of the freedom to get away from the Matrix, which controlled you and prevented expression, was promised the ability to live in a world, a city, the last of humanity, with freedom and expression, and then lived there for years seeing nothing but grey, total lack of art, expression, culture. It's almost hard not to sympathise with him, even if he did go too far in actually betraying them. And the thought occurs, thinking back to that first film now, is why, if they have this technology with the computers and the ability to go into the Matrix, their own Matrix constructions, why don't they use that to learn the skills they need? Because we see in the first film they can simply upload training for martial arts of all sorts, and even flying a helicopter straight away with the touch of a button, but nobody thought to maybe upload the skills of an artist, a painter, a potter. All this was beyond them, because apparently nobody makes anything now. And as a final nail in the coffin for this, I'll just quickly go through scenes of the Merovingians' home, where we see the restaurant area, we see the interior, and where one of the fight scenes happen. We see all this high art. In fact, he's the only one who seems to appreciate this high art, yet is depicted as this despicable pervert, really, this hedonistic freak. Later on you see him in a bizarre fetish club environment, and yet he's the only one who seems to appreciate high art, which is an odd choice to imply that there's, we see that people in the city are living this completely barren, horrible, rundown, dirty environment, and that is humanity and their choice, and is seen as the heroes and the good people, while somebody who's shown as a bad person is the one enjoying style, art, high art, the very high-skilled carvings, paintings, the high-crafted weapons. Again, remember the very crude knife that the Agent Smith in the City of Zion had, and compare it to the weapons on the wall in his living spaces and halls. It's hard not to imagine that somebody's implying that even actually appreciating high art or the high quality art is somehow sinful. But maybe I'm reading too much, I don't know. I'd be interested in the comments on that. But at the very minimum, the fact that this exists in the Matrix world means that people coming out of it have countless examples of what can be done, of countless inspiration. It might take a genius to invent something, but it only takes somebody quite clever to copy it. So these people have been given the leg up on the ladder, and yet have then jumped off the ladder right down to ground level, below Stone Age, when it comes to art and design. As an aside, I'll also nitpick at a couple of scenes attached to this moment in the film where they go underground into a completely dry looking cellar area where somehow there's a water reflection on the background coming from nowhere because there's no water, but obviously somebody thought, oh, it looks like a sewer, we'll project on a reflective water look on the back because that's atmospheric. Again, to me it shows sloppiness in a AAA film. You've also got the fight scene where you've got the world's worst effort from Neo, who for some bizarre reason fights these people who we know he's willing to kill because they get killed as it goes on, and he has every motivation to deal with these people as fast as possible because he knows the twins are hunting the rest. Yeah, he goes through all this nonsense of punching and kicking and hitting people with the handles of all the weapons, hitting them with the side of the weapons, pinning in particular one guy to the wall. Why didn't he just stab him? Because he needed to get by these people. They were all evil sidekicks in this film. He's on a mission to save not only the people he cares about directly, but also humanity itself from these programs and artificial people. Yet it goes to this nonsense act. Again, it's like something out of the old cheesy Xena and Hercules series where they were frightened to show anybody actually hurting each other or killing each other, so they had to show everybody bonking each other on the head, knocking each other out, or just knocking each other over, and then 1 minute later they get up and dust themselves off and run away. It's very out of place, really, and I don't know whether it was done to spin out the film. It was maybe a misguided attempt to make Nero look good because he was reluctant to kill these, again, as we find out with the sort of vampiristic ones, that they're from a previous generation of the Matrix, so they're not even human. And yet, they're just programs, and yet he's acting in this weird way. Yeah, of course, this scene was another, just like the cave scene, was another showpiece where there was a heavy focus on, it was displayed in trailers and promo material and favourable making ofs and so on. If the most focused upon showstopper scenes supposedly are sloppy and ill-conceived, confusing, badly rendered, then I think that says a lot about the team and the problems within it, or maybe the problems inherent to the industry itself, that this is the pinnacle of it and gets by. And so I'd hope as part of the conclusion of this that the nitpicking serves a purpose of highlighting what was missing in this film, namely artistic expression, a people who have no real art or culture, despite the fact that when you think of every people and culture, be it long gone, like Aztecs, Incas and so on, or ones which have been around a while and still around, Japanese, Chinese, and you think of past cultures and civilizations, Romans, Greeks, what pops to mind is often the first thing that pops to mind is their architecture, art and culture of various kinds. Yet somebody designed an entire people in this world devoid of those things that you would expect to come right to the mind. And I wonder what kind of person would design a world that lacked something so fundamental to every people has ever existed that we've ever known of, which is their cultural, artistic, spiritual expressions. It's quite a bizarre thing. And I think the message to take home of that is not only that this film is absolutely rotten and is riddled with flaws, but also that we as a people ourselves shouldn't head towards this. This should not be our destiny. We should take advantage of the freedom we have now to express ourselves, take advantage of the freedom to create culture, art from the heart that matters to us, that lifts people up, that improves upon what at least you could do or what other people can do, that keeps something alive, tradition alive, what you think matters alive, gets a message across. And if you think you can do something, whatever it is, craft, art, painting, music, whatever it is, writing, poetry, short stories, try it. Have a go at it. There's countless examples in this of things that I'm sure a lot of amateurs could have done better, like some of the props I've pointed out, or some of the oversights in world design. If you can do something better, do it. And I don't mean that as a sort of mean challenge, like a bully pushing you, saying, if you think you can do better, you try. No, genuinely, I would like to see somebody try. If you have an interest in filmmaking, you don't need to think, oh, I'll have to do a 90-minute film, a 2-hour film. Don't, for your first thing you're writing, write a novel. You write a short story, try maybe a short poem, a limerick even, and try something small to start with. And maybe it won't be the best thing in the world. Don't expect your first go at something to be the best, but try it. Try it and see what you can produce. You'll probably surprise yourself, especially if you stick at it and it's something that could benefit from other people, like obviously something that requires more manpower, budget, like film. Then if you put in the effort and produce, let's say just a 2-minute film, then people will see that and might get interested. People will see that and say, oh, I'll give that person a hand. I really like what they've done. If you start the movement, then the ball can keep rolling and other people maybe can pitch in. But if you don't do anything, then nobody will even know there's somebody there to help or worth helping. And if it's something that you can do solo or something that you can join a club and do with other people, which is a good idea, then do that as well. Don't turn into the people of the city of Zion. Don't become empty, expressionless people. Any attempt to do this is always a good thing for you and other people. We've all got it in us. As I say, the cavemen had to go at painting in a wall. I'd hope anybody listening to this has more ability than the cavemen to paint. So have a go. And whatever you find you enjoy, whatever instrument of music, tool for visual arts, whatever style of writing, poetry that you are interested in reading or interested in trying, just try it. If calligraphy tickles your fancy, go for it. Because all these things are worth expressing yourself and exploring and can lead to other ideas. So take this film not only as a lesson and warning for what not to become, not for what we don't want our people to become in the future, but also as a lesson for what you could do in creating art, film, music, whatever, because I'm sure there'll be people out there who have not tried anything, people out there who have been doing things and maybe haven't been discovered yet. Pass them about. Tell other people about them. Everybody's already got knowledge of the top records promoted by Sony, the top downloads supported on Apple iTunes, but don't ignore the smaller artists who maybe are being overlooked but could be watered with attention and support into something greater, and include yourself in that, the listener right now. And so on that note, I'd like to thank you for listening if you've made it to this point, and I hope to see you here and at Mjolnir at the movies. Do subscribe there. You'll see some excellent content from Neil and David there. I'll include a link below to this. And with that, goodbye.